Hi everyone, and welcome to week 2. I thought we would spend some time in this discussion talking a little bit more about the digitized books that you've read about, the book websites. And I wanted to do that because I realized that I gave you the explanations in the text, but sometimes, in my opinion, it's easier if you can actually see it. And so I want to go through some of the book websites we've talked about and just show you some examples about why they are important. All right, so let's get started. And I'm starting with Google Books, and the reason is that Google Books is probably the one that is most familiar to everybody, and that, you know, the search technique is going to be familiar to you because you're used to using Google anyway. So that's why I like to use it. Now, one thing I didn't mention in the text was that Google Books, the kind of the downside of it is that they are no longer actively digitizing books. Now, that's not a huge deal because they have so many that can be helpful to you that I don't think that's a problem. But what the problem is that what they have isn't being added to, except for publishers providing either sneak peeks, previews, or a card catalog entry for their books. All right, but Google themselves is not actively digitizing or scanning books. So let's go ahead and take a look at Google Books. And as you recall from the website, I did talk about how you could search via Google the website or just the website Google Books, and I'm going to concentrate on the Google Books website. And it looks very much like Google does, right? It says Google Books, and it has the big box that you can search in. It's just like a Google search, so you can put in whatever you would like. You can put in your ancestor's name, you can put in a keyword, you can do whatever you would like. Now, I want you to notice that under the search box is the words My Library, and those are kind of in purple because I had clicked on them. I want you just to take note of that, and we're going to come back to that. And as you know, in the course materials, we talk a little bit about My Library. So here's a search that I've done, and this is on Daughters of the American Revolution. And what I knew when I did this search is that they have the Daughters of the American Revolution magazine, the old magazine. So I knew that, and I knew that would be one of the things that came up. Now, if you notice from the search that I did, if you look at that top toolbar, I didn't put quotes around that phrase, and I could have because that would have helped. Now, what I have done, and as you can see, I've chosen to go ahead and narrow my search to the 19th century. And I got to that by clicking on Tools, and then it brought down that kind of sub-toolbar where I have my red arrow. And one of the choices was to specify a date range. And I wanted the 19th century because I knew that Daughters of the American Revolution magazine was around in the 1800s. And so here's some of my results, and you can see the magazine, one of the issues is right there at the top. Now, as you know, older items are going to be free, downloadable, public domain works, but not everything is. If you look at our third entry here, the Tribune, Almanac, and Political Register, you can see that it's a snippet view. And that means that I'm only going to be able to see like the sentence or whatever the keywords that I entered in that text. I'm not going to be able to see a whole page or pages. So that's the snippet view. And this is an older book, but it could be that someone has put some limitations on it. So that's why. Now, here's one of the issues of Daughters of the American Revolution magazine, and as you can see, it's in the viewer. I'm looking just at that magazine. Now, what I wanted to point out is there's the search engine at the top that we used prior, but on the left-hand side, there's also a search engine. and that allows me to search just inside that periodical. And you'll see there's other tools here. On the left, there's that big orange button that I can click on and download the book. I can also save it in Google Play, and if you have the Google Books or Google Play app, you can access it there. And then I could add this to my library, which is an enhanced feature for Google Books, and that's up at the top where it says Add to My Library. Towards the right, upper right, you see it says front cover and there's arrows. I can page through this and I can look at the various pages and read it as well. Now, that left-hand side column, I just want to show you once again that there's that big orange button that says ebook free, but it does some other things as well. So under that is get this book in print, which if I click on that will show me what bookstores have this item. Now, typically it's going to show me things like Barnes & Noble and a few others. You know, this is an older book. I doubt they really have it, but that's an option. It will also give you WorldCat, which I'm going to show you in a second, which will help you to get a physical copy that you could borrow from a library. And you can see that right there. So in this case, when I hit get this book in print, it shows me A Books, that's a used book retailer, On-Demand Books, Amazon, and then it says Find in a Library. So that Find in a Library is going to take me to WorldCat. And there's WorldCat. Now, we've talked about WorldCat in our first course, and I've mentioned it quite a few times in the second round. And WorldCat is a World Library catalog. Not everybody participates. I think there's a fee, and that's why. It has 2 billion items, and they're available worldwide. And so what happens is when you click on that Find in a Library, it takes you to the page in WorldCat where that item is found. And then with that, you could add your zip code and it will show you which libraries have that item. So it's very handy to do that. Now, in some cases, what we're searching for are more reference books. And so that maybe doesn't work as well, but it's still an important feature. So here it is in WorldCat. It says Daughters of the American Revolution magazine. Now this is kind of the run. This isn't just that one magazine issue that we looked at. And you can see that there's card catalog information. And if I scroll down, there's even more card catalog information about this book. Now, here's the beauty of WorldCat. You put in your zip code or where you are, and it shows you what places have that item nearest you. Now, the phrase nearest you is subjective, right? Because sometimes what's nearest us, it'll say a library 100 miles away or 3,000 miles away, and that's not nearest. But that's the nearest they could find. And in this case, if you don't know, I live in Southern California, so it says nearest to me is San Diego State University, and that's about an hour from me, so that makes sense. And from this page, I can go straight to their library catalog and see, you know, how can I access that magazine? Is it something that is in their rare book collection? Is it available to me to check out? The other thing that I've done personally is I've gone to my library, my local public library, and I've asked to interlibrary loan items. Sometimes that's the best way to do it. So don't, you know, if you see that it's far away or it's somewhere you don't want to go, try and see if you can interlibrary loan it. And this does work even with journal articles. So keep that in mind. The other last thing I want to point out to you is, you know, I entered a zip code near me, but I could, where I live, I could enter a zip code of a place I'm going to go do research at. Let's say I'm doing a research trip for a week, and I could put in that zip code or that place and find out what books are available there that might help me. So keep that in mind as well. Now, as you can see, and I mentioned this a little bit before, there's 2 search engines on a page. Now, this is fairly common. Not all digitized book websites have this, but a few do. The top search engine searches the website. This middle search engine just searches the periodical or the book itself. All right? So that allows you to find something you need, but then to find the specific pages that you need through that search engine. And so I highly recommend using that. Now, in this case, Google's populated it with the same phrase I used to find the magazine, Daughters of the American Revolution. I would just need to delete that and then put what I want specifically. Maybe it's a name, or it's a column, or an author, or something like that. And then I could find what I wanted. And then down where the arrow is, where my arrow is my library, which is my bookshelves, and then there's also the My History feature. Okay, so here we are. We're back at the magazine, and here's another view for you. And at the top are some tools that you need to be aware of as well. My favorite, quite frankly, is at the top left, and that's the magnifying glass, the plus or minus, so that you can make the image bigger or smaller depending on what your eyesight needs are. Often I make it much bigger so it just is easier to read. You can also do things like make that image of the book reader larger. You can actually do a screenshot or kind of like a snippet with those little scissors and just screenshot a certain part of a page, for example. Now, that is not available if it's a book that is newer. That's only available on books in the public domain. There's also the ability to get a link to that book, add it to your My Library feature, and then write a review if you're so inclined. And then additional tools are right there on the right where you can page through the book. And there's some advanced features where you see that gear that's at the far right. So that just shows you, so it's a little easier to see. Now, let's talk about my library, because quite frankly, I think this is important for family historians to use. And for whatever reason, not everybody knows about it. So here it is. It's right under that Google Books search engine. And you click on it, and it looks something like this. Now, these vertical bookshelves, basically, with books, are your bookshelves. And you can see over to the left, it says, there's a big orange button that says New Shelf, and that says My Library, and it has different titles. Now, Google self-populates some of these, like To Read or Have Read or something like that. But you can title by going to New Shelf. You can get new shelves and title them whatever you want. And I tend to do things like a surname I'm researching, a place that I'm researching, a topic that has to do with my ancestor. And sometimes what I'll do is I'll just sit down and I'll find everything I need. I put it on the bookshelf, and then I can access it whenever I need to. Now, just a little bit of a kind of user warning. You need to name the shelf before you add it, because you cannot name the shelf while you're trying to add something. So go in and do that first, and then do your search. Now, bookshelves can be private or public. Private means that no one can access them except you. Public is that they are accessible and they might show up in Google searches. And that may or may not be a big deal. If you're doing a combined family history project with cousins, you may want that. Now, I gave you access to one of my bookshelves in the course materials so you can kind of check it out. I highly recommend using this because wherever you are, you can access this. and you just need your internet connection. So if you decide to go to Salt Lake and research, or even research at a local library, you can pull this up and say, okay, these are the books I have access to on the internet, so I don't need to waste time on this. Or this is the book I really wanted and I can't get full access to it, and so you can search for that. So there's lots of things you can do with this. Just like with anything, you can find search help. There is one that's all about how to use Google Books. I highly recommend that to get some idea, and so that you can use it to the best of its advantages. So always look for that. It's usually in Google Help. Now, I didn't talk about this in the course content, but I do want to mention it because I think it's an important website and too few people know about it. And that is Google Scholar. Now, Google Scholar is like Google Books, but it has more scholarly materials. Now, don't let that scare you, because in reality, think about a lot of what we do, historians study, social scientists study, and so you can find wonderful, rich articles, dissertations, all kinds of things in Google Scholar. So this is what it looks like, and it's a keyword search just like everything else, and you just go to Google Scholar to find it. You will also find that it has case law, and it also includes Google Patent Search. So here's an example of what I did. I put in WCTU. Some of you may be aware that's short for Women's Christian Temperance Union. And so when I did that, I got 9,000 results. Now these are going to be more academic books and journal articles. Now it has a different interface than Google Books, though it does include some Google Books. But the interface is very basic, and as you can see, it's a little different because under the whatever the title is, it gives us the name of the author or one of the authors, the year, where it's from, and then it says things like cited by 101. That means that there's 101 other articles that have this as a source citation. You can actually click on that and see that list, and that could be helpful to you. There's also a related articles. So very basic. Some of these are going to take you to Google Books. Some of them are going to take you to a journal's website. Some of them can't take you to more than maybe just a home page because you have to subscribe to that journal in order to see the article. So that might be a little frustrating, but then you might be able to get a copy through interlibrary loan or at your local academic library. Now there's more features up at the top left where those three lines are. And you can see they include case law, they include My Library. It has a version of My Library, but it's not as nice as Google Books' My Library, so I'll just let you know that. Now, what it does have that Google Books doesn't is alerts. This is very similar to Google Alerts if you've ever used Google Alerts, and basically you do a search, you set the alert, and you don't have to do that search ever again because it's going to email you when it has items that match your search criteria. So that can be really helpful, and it's a way to research when you're asleep or when you are on vacation or wherever, so you might want to consider that. And once again, there's our results. And you can see I have there highlighted the cited by and the related articles. So don't just stop at the title. Make sure you click on some of those as well. And there's a close-up for you. Now, what happens is I find something I like and I click on it. It may take me, like I said before, to Google Books or a publisher, but it might take me to JSTOR, which is also a periodical index. So that's JSTOR. And in this case, it did take me to JSTOR. And JSTOR, as part of their periodical index, they do have digitized journal articles. However, in some cases, they may have a fee associated to them. If they're older, usually you can download it, but you're going to want to create a MyJSTOR account. Now, they have paid accounts, but they also have a free account, and I believe that free account allows you to download 3 articles at a time onto their virtual bookshelf, so you can't download it to your computer. And as soon as you put one back, then you can get another one. So that might be one way around it. Now, you can see over on the left, there's other ways to focus your article or your search, and that includes, you know, from a date range, for example. You can sort it by date, so you can do that as well to narrow that search, especially if you do a search that results in thousands, like in this case, 9,000 results. And I just want to say something about this search, because it's not the best. I did the WCTU, that's an acronym, but I might want to also do Women's Christian Temperance Union and spell it out, because I never know whether the article used WCTU or Women's Christian Temperance Union in the title. So I might want to do a search on both of those. And you can see there's the My Library feature, but like I said, it's very different than the Google Books one. And you can also set up a profile. In fact, if you've published articles, you can actually do a few other things as well. Now, here's the My Library. So do you see how different it is? It's very basic. It's a little hard to maneuver. It's not graphic heavy like the My Library and Google Books. It's basically just a list. And so keep that in mind, because obviously if you end up having hundreds of items, this is what it's going to look like. There's a few other features when you go into My Library, as you can see. I mean, one's a trash can, so you can delete something. You can edit, you can download, you can tag things. So there's a few things that you can do with this My Library feature. All right. Now, that's just kind of a taste, because I wanted to kind of give you something to think about, but let's move on to Internet Archive. And I don't know that I said this before, but just know when we talk about these websites, you need to try them, because it really is about you trying it and getting used to it and, you know, exploring. So if you're not familiar with the Internet Archive, this is what it looks like, and they have all kinds of materials. They have books and microfilm and videos and all kinds of stuff. Probably more well known for what they call the Wayback Machine, which is there at the top, that allows you to put in a URL and then find a cached or a saved copy of that URL. And so that's probably what people are most familiar with. But I want to just concentrate on the texts, and that's that orange open book. And so I'm going to go to that collection, and this is what it looks like when you click on that orange book. Now, for genealogy, I might want to concentrate on some of these like American libraries, Canadian libraries, but I especially want to concentrate on additional collections, because in additional collections, there is actually a collection called Genealogy, and so that's an important one I want to check out. Here's some of the other things that are in those various collections. You can see State Library of North Carolina, the Family History Library, which doesn't have a lot, but it has some stuff. Minnesota Historical Society, North Carolina Directories. So there's a ton of information here. So let's just look at the Family History Library, even though it's not a lot. In fact, if you remember, I think right now the Family History Library's digital book collection has, gosh, something like 300,000 books, so this obviously is very little. But this is what the interface looks like, and once again, that search engine right there to the left under the 809, you can use that to search inside this collection. And then they have other ways to narrow down the topics. So that's helpful. It has a very Pinterest feel. You know, you can see thumbnails of everything. So this is kind of what you see when you go to this. So you could browse, you could just scroll up and down and look at these different books, or you could search in the collection. So here's an example of one of the books, Virginia over Wharton Parish Register 1720 to 1760. And just like the other books, I can scroll through page by page. I can do a search. I can do all kinds of things once I'm inside this book. Now scroll down, and when you scroll down, you're going to see a kind of a card catalog view of the book, but also your download options and what collections that this appears in. Now you can see the download options. There's probably some that you don't recognize, but then there's some that you do, like Kindle and PDF. I really recommend, if you're going to download it, to download it as a PDF. And then you can kind of go from there. But it's up to you. If you want to download it to your reader in one of these formats, like EPUB, then go ahead and do that. Now, I don't know if you remember, but when we were on the text page, there was something called Additional Collections. This is where the genealogy collection is. But it's also where there's all kinds of other stuff. In fact, you can see at the top left, there's a microfilm collection. That microfilm collection comes from Allen County Public Library and a few others. Now, if we scroll down, and I should tell you that sometimes where these are in relation to this grid changes, and so just be aware of that. There's the genealogy collection. Now, once again, we've got this kind of graphic representation, but we can search on that search engine over on the left. And this is going to be all kinds of things. This is going to be surname books. These are going to be parish registers. They're going to be transcriptions. You name it, it's in here. All right, let's move on to Hattie Trust. And Hattie Trust is different than the others in that it is kind of a consortium of various libraries. And there are subscribing libraries to this program, so it's a little different. But once again, we have that big search box that we can search a keyword in, or even your ancestor's name. So once again, I did WCTU to see what would happen, and they found 800 items. And remember, I could redo that to say Women's Christian Temperance Union. And so there's all kinds of stuff here, and this all looks great, but there is a lot of items, so I may want to go ahead and narrow it down typically by what I find on the left-hand side. So here's one of the examples I found that I clicked on, Women Lawyers and the Origins of Professional Identity in America, the Letters of the Equity Club, 1887 to 1890. And so you can see it's kind of the typical library card catalog kind of version. And at the bottom, it says viewability, and it says full view, and it says original from the University of Michigan. Now, if I was not able to see it, there would be some kind of indication of that. And then if I want, to the left, there's that similar items box where I can choose items that are very similar that might also help my research. So right there. And then there's viewability if you couldn't see it. So I went ahead and I clicked on it, and there's the first page. And just like the other digitized book websites, at the top right, I can page through page by page. I also have some tools there going down the right-hand side. I can use the search engine for this book and just search in this book. And then on the right, I can do different things like download it as a PDF, add it to a collection. They do allow you to create collections on Hathy Trust. And I can share it. So I can share it to social media or via an email or put a link to it, embed that onto my blog or website. So there's that left-hand side kind of magnified so you can see it a little bit better. Now, I know I went through all of that really fast, but I just wanted to give you a little bit more information than what we had in the course. I want to kind of end with, remember that libraries also have digitized books. And so I want you to remember, and I think we probably went over this in the first course, what kind of libraries exist, because that can help you find the digitized books that you need. So that, for example, there's public libraries, there's private libraries, academic, which are going to be rich sources for these books, state libraries, national, and genealogical. So keep that all in mind. All right, I thought that might help to give you a little bit more information about the genealogy book websites and give you some ideas. I hope you take some time now to do some searches and see what you can find. See you in the next lesson.